Maybe the greatest enemy in your life is not outside of you. Maybe it is not in your circumstances, not in the crisis, not in other people, not in the lack of opportunities. Maybe the greatest enemy in your life is inside your own mind, in silence, working without being noticed, weakening your courage, disturbing your thoughts, stealing your peace, pulling you, little by little, away from the abundance and prosperity that could be part of your life. And what makes it even more dangerous is this: that enemy rarely shows up looking like evil. It does not arrive announcing destruction. It does not clearly say that it wants to stop you. It does not introduce itself as a saboteur. It comes disguised as doubt, disguised as worry, disguised as overthinking, disguised as insecurity, disguised as maybe later, disguised as thoughts that seem small, but when repeated day after day, become powerful enough to rule an entire life. In the book Outwitting the Devil, Napoleon Hill presents a profound and unsettling idea. The human mind is a battlefield, and on that battlefield, two opposing influences are competing for control over our lives. On one side is God, the source of all positivity, courage, faith, discipline, clarity, abundance, wisdom, purpose, and strength to overcome. On the other side is the devil, representing everything that weakens a human being from within: fear, doubt, negativity, mental slavery, procrastination, confusion, and self-sabotage. In the symbolic language of the book, God inspires expansion. The devil works through contraction. God leads toward freedom. The devil leads toward inner captivity. God strengthens. The devil weakens. And among all the weapons the devil uses to control the human mind, the most powerful one is fear. Because fear does not need to destroy a person all at once. It only needs to make them doubt themselves. It only needs to make them postpone what they know they should do. It only needs to make them settle for less than they were meant to live. It only needs to make them believe they are not capable. It only needs to make them see scarcity where possibility still exists. It only needs to make them imagine the worst until they no longer have the courage to move. And two fears in particular have silently imprisoned countless people: the fear of poverty and the fear of death. These two fears have ruled thoughts, decisions, emotions, and destinies. They have stolen sleep, weakened faith, crushed initiative, and kept many people far from the abundant life they could have built. Because when a person is dominated by fear, they do not truly live. They only react. They only try to protect themselves. They only survive. They only defend. And a life lived only in defense will never fully reach what it was capable of becoming. But here is a powerful truth. You can choose who will govern your mind. You can choose which voice will carry the most authority within you. You can choose whether you will be guided by faith or anxiety, by courage or doubt, by abundance or scarcity, by the truth that builds you up or the lie that paralyzes you. In this video, you are going to understand how fear controls your mind in silence, how it works according to the principles of outwitting the devil, why the fear of poverty and the fear of death are so destructive, and how to silence that control so you can live with greater peace, greater courage, greater clarity, and greater prosperity. Because your outer life always begins with whatever is ruling your inner world. Fear rarely presents itself as fear. That is one of its greatest tricks. If it came in an obvious form, it would be easier to fight, but that is almost never how it works. Most of the time, fear whispers. It whispers that this is not the right time yet. It whispers that you might fail. It whispers that people will judge you. It whispers that it would be better to wait a little longer. It whispers that it is safer not to try. It whispers that dreaming too big could lead to disappointment. It whispers that maybe it is better to settle for less as long as nothing gets out of control. And little by little, without realizing it, a person begins to shrink. They bury their courage. They get used to postponing. They reduce the size of their dreams. They trade purpose for comfort. They accept a smaller life, not because that is what they were born for, but because fear has reshaped the way they see everything. Hill shows that a mind without definite direction becomes easy prey for negative influence. When a person does not consciously choose their thoughts, their principles, and their purpose, they become vulnerable. And fear finds exactly there the opening it needs, because fear distorts vision. It makes the problem look bigger than it really is. It makes the opportunity seem more dangerous than it truly is. It makes a person imagine defeat before they even begin. It makes the mind create negative scenarios that do not even exist yet. It makes the future look closed, even when possibilities are still there. And the most dangerous part is that many people call this realism. But not every pessimistic thought is wisdom. Many times, it is simply fear dressed up as reason. There is a difference between wisdom and fear. Wisdom observes and decides with discernment. Fear paralyzes and then calls that protection. Wisdom looks carefully without losing clarity. Fear exaggerates the risk until it kills action. Wisdom preserves peace. Fear creates torment. Wisdom helps you move forward with maturity. Fear makes you step back and then tries to convince you that retreat was the wise thing to do. That is why so many people spend years believing they are being balanced, when in reality, they are simply being ruled by a defeated mindset. Without noticing it, they have already handed the throne of the mind over to fear. They begin consulting fear before every decision. Before taking action, they already imagine failure. Before building, they already expect loss. Before trusting, they already project disappointment. Before moving forward, they have already retreated internally. And once that happens, abundance begins to drift further away. Not because God has stopped providing, not because opportunities have disappeared, but because the person's mind has closed itself off from believing, closed itself off from acting, closed itself off from seeing possibilities, closed itself off from building, closed itself off from living with confidence. God is the source of everything that produces life: courage, peace, direction, creativity, discipline, wisdom, abundance. The devil, in this symbolic reading, represents everything that seeks to corrupt that life from within. He does not need to destroy someone publicly. He does not need to cause a visible collapse. He only needs to plant repeated negative thoughts. He only needs to install fear. He only needs to convince a person that they are weak, vulnerable, incapable, threatened, small. An entire life can be diminished by thoughts that were never challenged. And among those thoughts, few are as destructive as the ones born from the fear of poverty. The fear of poverty does not show up only when money is lacking. In fact, it can dominate even those who have already achieved a great deal. Because this fear is not only the fear of not having enough, it is the fear of losing, the fear of not being enough, the fear of humiliation, the fear of dependence, the fear of not being able to sustain what has been built, the fear of falling back into vulnerability. And when this fear takes over the mind, it changes the way a person lives. They stop building with vision and start reacting with anxiety. They stop planting with wisdom and begin living in desperation. They stop trusting and begin trying to control everything. They stop growing and begin merely defending themselves. The mind goes into survival mode, and a person who lives in survival mode for too long cannot express the best of who they are, because survival mode narrows vision. A person stops thinking about purpose, legacy, contribution, and growth. They begin thinking only about how not to lose. And there is a huge difference between living to build and living only to avoid loss. Many people accept a life that wounds their soul because of the fear of poverty. They accept the wrong relationships, the wrong path, the wrong job, the wrong decisions. Not because those things are right for them, but because the fear of scarcity has become louder than the voice of truth. This fear makes a person trade peace for the appearance of security, trade purpose for momentary relief, trade courage for control, trade vision for the fear of not having enough. But true prosperity is never born from a mind in chains. Prosperity is born from inner alignment. It is born from clarity. It is born from wisdom. It is born from courage. It is born from a mind that has not been conquered by panic. When the fear of poverty is in control, a person begins to see life as a constant threat. But when the mind returns to alignment with faith, purpose, and discipline, everything begins to change. They start recognizing opportunities again. They begin developing value again. They begin acting with direction again. They begin building with intelligence again. They begin thinking like someone who plants, not someone who is only trying to escape disaster. This is not about denying problems. It is not about pretending financial struggles are not real. It is about refusing to let mental scarcity become the government of your life. Because whatever rules your mind will eventually rule your decisions. And your decisions will shape your destiny. Now think about the fear of death. Perhaps this is one of the deepest fears of the human soul. And precisely because it is so deep, it influences life in quiet and subtle ways. The fear of death does not appear only as fear of the end. It also appears as fear of illness, fear of aging, fear of fragility, fear of losing control, fear of the unknown, fear of loss. And when this fear takes control, a person stops living fully in the present. They become hyper-alert. They begin expecting bad news. They look at everything through tension. They turn tomorrow into a threat. They lose the peace of today because of scenarios that have not even happened. The soul grows tired. The mind loses rest. Life loses its lightness. Some people do not realize it, but they are no longer living. They are simply monitoring danger. And that is a prison. Others try to escape this fear by filling life with excess, distraction, busyness, consumption, appearances, and constant noise. But behind much of that, restlessness is simply a desperate attempt to avoid facing the emptiness within. The fear of death also steals depth. It steals serenity. It steals presence. It steals gratitude. It steals the ability to live with meaning. But the answer to this fear is not to deny the reality of death. The answer is to refuse to let that fear become a tyrant in your mind. When a person finds purpose, faith, and a deeper vision of life, they begin to lose the habit of living in panic. They learn to value today more deeply. They learn to live with greater awareness. They learn to replace torment with presence. They learn that peace is not born from total control, but from trust. And here is a powerful truth. Fear is always trying to take the place of faith. It wants to interpret everything before you do. It wants to reach conclusions before reality does. It wants to decide for you. It wants to speak louder than your hope. It wants to become the main voice inside your mind. But faith, at its core, is a matter of inner authority. It is deciding that fear will no longer interpret your life. It is deciding that negativity will not have the final word. It is choosing to align yourself with whatever strengthens, builds, and produces life. If everything begins in the mind, then the most important battle in your life is not first financial, professional, or external. It is mental. It is spiritual. It is internal. Before visible defeat, there was usually an invisible surrender. Before outward victory, there was an inward decision. Before a changed life, there was a changed government within the mind. Whoever wins inwardly begins to win outwardly. And whoever is defeated inwardly will, sooner or later, see that defeat overflow into every area of life. Maybe you recognize the signs of this rule of fear. A person keeps postponing important decisions. They need everyone's approval. They struggle to trust their own ability. They overthink and underact. They keep waiting for the perfect moment. They shrink their dreams to avoid discomfort. They mistake pessimism for maturity. They justify themselves constantly. They feel tired even though they have not moved forward. These are signs of a mind already weakened by negative influence. In the book, Hill shows that the devil does not need to destroy a person in one dramatic moment. He only needs to keep them drifting. He only needs to keep them distracted. He only needs to keep them without purpose. He only needs to keep them afraid. He only needs to stop them from taking ownership of their own consciousness. And drifting is dangerous because it looks normal. A person works, handles responsibilities, pays bills, fulfills obligations, moves through the days, but inwardly they do not grow. They do not awaken. They do not take direction. They do not strengthen courage. They do not expand their vision. They are simply moving, and movement is not the same as transformation. That is why silencing fear matters so much. This is not merely an emotional issue. It is a destiny issue. So how do you do it? The first step is to understand that not every thought deserves to be believed. That alone is deeply liberating. Many people suffer because they believe everything they think. But a thought is not automatically the truth. A thought can be the echo of old pain. It can be the reflection of trauma. It can be fear in disguise. It can be the voice of scarcity. It can be a lie repeated so many times that it started to sound real. If you do not learn how to confront your thoughts, you will end up obeying many of them. And obeying defeated thoughts is the same as handing your direction over to fear. The second step is to decide who will have authority in your mind. This is a deep choice. You can keep allowing fear to interpret your life, or you can decide that your mind will be governed by truth, faith, courage, abundance, and purpose. You can decide that you will no longer serve thoughts that diminish you. That choice has to be renewed every day, because every day voices will try to enter. Voices of doubt, voices of surrender, voices of comparison, voices of scarcity. And every day, you will have to decide which of those voices gets room inside you. The third step is to live with a definite purpose. A mind without purpose is far easier for fear to dominate. When you do not know where you are going, every threat can stop you. Every opinion can shake you. Every difficulty can make you retreat. But when clarity exists, fear may still show up. Yet it does not rule. Purpose is knowing who you want to become. It is knowing what you want to build. It is knowing which principles will sustain your life. It is knowing what you are no longer willing to compromise. Whoever does not live with direction ends up being led by circumstances. Whoever lives with purpose begins to lead their own life. The fourth step is to watch what feeds your mind. There is no strong mind being nourished by toxic noise all day long. What you consume shapes your thoughts, shapes your beliefs, shapes your emotional patterns, shapes your reactions. If your mind is fed every day by comparison, pessimism, overload, fear, desperation, and confusion, it will begin to reproduce that same climate on the inside. But when you begin feeding your inner life with truth, wisdom, silence, prayer, discipline, the right books, and reflection, something starts changing. You stop strengthening fear within you. The fifth step is to act, even without feeling completely safe. This is essential, because many people wait for fear to disappear before they move. But in many moments of life, courage does not come before action. It is born in action. You weaken fear when you begin to move in spite of it. When you take one step. When you stand your ground. When you do what needs to be done, even without absolute guarantees. Fear wants total control before action. Faith is willing to walk even without seeing everything. The sixth step is to develop mental discipline. You will not always control the first thought that appears, but you can control what you do with it after it appears. You can decide whether you will feed it or confront it, whether you will amplify it or interrupt it, whether you will bow to it or stand firm. Mental discipline means refusing to continue what weakens you. It means realizing, this thought is trapping me. It is pulling me away from clarity. It is draining my strength, so I am not going to let it rule. The seventh step is to understand that abundance begins within. Many people seek prosperity only outwardly. They want more money, more results, more open doors. But if the mind remains enslaved to fear, a person may gain things and still continue living in inner scarcity, still restless, still anxious, still without peace, still expecting everything to collapse at any moment. True abundance begins when the inner world is no longer ruled by panic, when the mind gains order, when the soul gains peace, when thoughts gain direction, when a person learns to live without consulting fear at every step. Prosperity is not only about having more. It is about becoming someone inwardly prepared to build, multiply, manage, and enjoy what has been given. And that brings us to the heart of this message. You can choose who will dominate your mind and your life. You can keep making room for thoughts of scarcity. You can keep allowing the fear of poverty to steal your boldness. You can keep allowing the fear of death to steal your serenity. Or you can choose differently. You can decide that your mind will no longer be territory ruled by negativity. You can decide that doubt will not have the final word. You can decide that fear will no longer be king. You can choose to feed courage. You can choose to strengthen faith. You can choose to cultivate thoughts of life. You can choose to align your mind with the voice of God, the voice that produces peace, strength, clarity, wisdom, purpose, and abundance. This does not mean fear will never show up again. It simply means it will stop being in charge, and that changes everything, because feeling fear is not the same as being ruled by it. A person ruled by fear shrinks their life. A person who feels fear but refuses to surrender to it keeps moving forward, keeps building, keeps obeying the truth, keeps becoming who they were born to be. Maybe today you realize that you have been guided by scarcity. Maybe you realize that you have postponed too much. Maybe you see that the fear of poverty has stolen your peace. Maybe you see that the fear of death has occupied too much space in your mind. If that is happening, do not use that awareness to condemn yourself. Use it to wake up, because seeing the prison is already the beginning of freedom. From this day forward, you can watch your thoughts more carefully. You can interrupt negativity before it grows. You can refuse to feed defeat-driven scenarios. You can strengthen your inner life. You can reorganize your mind. You can take back ownership of your consciousness. Your mind was not created to be a house of torment. Your mind can become a place of peace, a place of order, a place of clarity, a place of strength, a place of prosperity. But that requires a decision. Fear loses strength when you stop feeding it, when you confront its lies, when you take responsibility for your mind, when you strengthen purpose, when you discipline your thoughts, when you choose courage again and again. And perhaps the most important question in this entire video is this: who is ruling your mind today? Faith or fear? Abundance or scarcity? Courage or paralysis? Truth or negativity? The answer to that question is shaping your life right now. If you want prosperity, protect your mind. If you want peace, protect your mind. If you want direction, protect your mind. If you want to live fully, protect your mind, because everything begins there. And I want to end by reminding you of something you may have needed to hear today. Fear may speak. but it does not have to rule. Fear may try to enter, but it does not have to remain. Fear may visit your thoughts, but it does not have to sit at the center of your life. You are not born to live bowed down under scarcity. You were not born to be a slave to anxiety. You were not born to spend your days being governed by thoughts that weaken you. You can silence that voice. You can take back command of your mind. You can rebuild your life from the inside out. You can choose faith. You can choose courage. You can choose abundance. You can choose to live with greater peace, greater clarity, and greater prosperity. And it all begins the moment you decide who will have access to the throne of your mind. If this message spoke to you, write this in the comments. Asterisk, asterisk, I choose courage, not fear. Asterisk, asterisk, and share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Maybe this is the message that person needed in order to begin breaking free on the inside. Subscribe to the channel if you want to keep receiving deep messages about the mind, purpose, prosperity, and inner transformation. And never forget, the life you build on the outside always begins with the voice you choose to listen to on the inside.